got brand new college football 26 information for you today, covering dynamic time of day, new player models, and even a road to glory feature, plus a whole lot more. And we're inching closer to my end of 2025 goal of 300,000 subscribers, and I'd love for you to subscribe if you're enjoying the news and breakdowns that I'm giving you each and every week. Now, everything we're breaking down is from the presentation side of things from the deep dive that EA just released. And one of the big features they're dropping this year is dynamic time of day, which is definitely a game changer. Lighting inside of a game is probably one of those things that a lot of us overlook, but it really does make the game look significantly much better. Think about all the years ago where we used to play Madden and the indoor lighting looked terrible, but some of the outdoor lighting looked great. This is obviously going to lean heavily into that. So for college football 26, they're talking how they've sort of improved their lighting system to help boost the realism, but the big part is how the dynamic time of day sort of kicks in. As you kind of notice where you're playing a game, the time of day is going to be a huge factor here. The lighting is going to change from quarter to quarter, which means that you could start a late afternoon game and then it'll be dark before the finish of the game. You could have a 6 p.m. kickoff in Chestnut Hill, and that's going to look different from a 6 p.m. kickoff in Austin, Texas, kind of reflecting how each location in the game is going to have unique lighting, again, based on the time of year and time of day. So that means that games in November are going to get darker sooner than those that are actually played in September. So for example, a game that starts at 3:30 p.m. in Happy Valley in September will still have the sun up at 5 p.m., but a game in November, the sun will be down as the game is ending. When you first booted up a game in college football 25, I think a lot of us really enjoyed sort of the runouts that happened, for the pregame stuff, whether it was Penn State or Ohio State or just your favorite squad out there. A lot of those traditions and pageantry elements felt great, but over time they kind of just waned on us and we kind of skipped by them because they were pretty much the same each time. But this year they're talking about having new runouts and they're sort of tailoring the pregame experience around that. They mentioned whether it's a primetime game, a rivalry steeped in history, or a quick matchup in your road to college football grind, their new runout system is going to ensure that every game is kind of tailored to the moment that's happening. One of the first ones they touch on are epic runouts, which are reserved for primetime pageantry. They say these are reserved for special night games across iconic locations. Epic runouts aim to create the best primetime experiences. These sequences are going to include light and drone shows, drawing from many of the real-world references they've seen in the game. And this is going to focus to immerse players in a thrilling atmosphere of a major matchup with the lights dimmed, kind of having phones out, and, just making it look a lot better. They even mentioned having Cocky at center stage, hyping up the crowd of South Carolina University, where obviously the stakes are pretty high and that crowd gets crazy. Now for the light shows, they actually have a specific amount of teams that are going to have those. So Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Nebraska, South Carolina, Tennessee, NC State, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Texas State, UCF, Boston College, Notre Dame, Rutgers, and UCLA. Each of those light shows will be specifically tailored to reflect that school's individual traditions and stadium vibe. So for example, Alabama, their stadium is going to light up red, giving you kind of a bold visual that matches, what the Crimson Tide is all about. For Tennessee, the light up T is going to shine brightly. For North Carolina, spotlights are going to move across the field, adding drama to kind of the Tar Heels entrance. Drone shows are something you probably saw in the very first College Football 26 trailer, and they mentioned specifically that those are going to be coming. Now the teams with drone shows in the game are going to include Arizona State, Cal, Florida, LSU, Texas, the Ohio State, Clemson, and Nebraska. A couple of examples here. Texas, the drones are going to create the famous Longhorn logo in the sky. For LSU, they're going to illuminate the night with a purple and gold design, honoring the Tigers' rich heritage. And I think when you combine these with sort of the epic runouts they're already doing, you throw the drone show in the sky, it just adds a lot here. Next up, they touch on traditional standard runouts. So tradition and atmosphere are what obviously we all know and love, and these team runouts are kind of built on, what we had for last year's sequences. But the goal here is to incorporate more traditions and new mascots as well. These are going to kind of focus on celebrating each program's unique rituals, bringing the spectacle of college football to life. So for example, a couple of highlights here. Ohio and Utah, the motorcycles lead the runout, adding kind of some, extra oomph to it. South Carolina, the iconic Cockaboose is going to arrive. And then Oklahoma is going to have the Sooner Schooner, the cherished wagon, obviously rolling out into the field. There's also a mention of quick runouts, which are kind of just streamlined for speed. So if you're playing sort of a quick experience like default road to the college football playoff, you're playing a ranked game, you don't need to see all that crazy stuff, that will be there. If you're in a Dynasty mode and you're playing an unranked CPU opponent at home, for example, you could also see kind of a streamlined one, because those don't really feel like big games. They're just kind of like a normal Saturday game. And I teased Road to Glory runouts earlier, or a Road to Glory feature earlier. There's actually specific Road to Glory runouts, and I think these are kind of a cool addition. So the Road to Glory runout sequence uses a player-controlled camera that gets you kind of the perspective of your athlete, using the right stick to look around in the tunnel and up at the fireworks blasting off, and kind of looking around at the press box as you hear up to 100,000 fans streaming, hopefully mostly for you. This is going to be a third-person camera and not a first-person camera, so I just want to make sure I call that out. But I think it's a really cool way as you are assuming the role of this player to kind of feel like you actually have, you know, a part of that team and a part of that game day. This Road to Glory Runout is also going to be available for you in college and in high school. So again, imagine going from high school into college. The stadium atmosphere is going to be crazy. You want to go to a big program to have those sort of epic runouts if you're going to be a player now in Road to Glory. Band formations are going to keep coming into the game, so they have iconic pregame band formations for teams like Illinois, Appalachian State, Minnesota, Penn State, Louisiana Lafayette, and they say many, many more. We also saw obviously Ohio State last year, but it sounds like they're really amping this up more. There are a ton of new mascots coming to the game this year. I believe last year there were about 50-ish or so, but they're bringing that number to a whole nother level now. So you have Utah, Iowa, Arkansas, Duke, Kansas and Kansas State, Mississippi State, Boise State, Boston College, Louisville, Pittsburgh, SMU, Army and Navy, NC State, Ohio, East Carolina, South Florida, Northwestern, Washington State and Oregon State, Rutgers, Kentucky, Missouri, Air Force, Arizona, Baylor, Cincinnati, Iowa State, Texas Tech, Akron, Bowling Green, Wyoming, Colorado State, Coastal Carolina, and even the Pop-Tarts Bowl mascot. Yes, even the Pop-Tarts Bowl mascot will be into the game, which I think is a big W. One of my favorite things I saw from the presentation side last year was the touchdown and turnover traditions. I just think they add a whole lot. You know, intercept a pass or you score a touchdown and see your guys in the sidelines celebrating in a way that is unique to that individual school. I think it's something that we all love. So some of the schools they mentioned here are Texas and Arizona's turnover swords. Both teams have introduced turnover swords, adding a distinct flair to their celebrations. And look out for those footballs stacking up in Arizona, which is cool. I talked about this in a previous video, but if you get 2-3 interceptions out there, you're going to see the footballs add up onto that sword. The Akron turnover tire is going to be placed around a player after an interception or fumble recovery. Georgia Savage pads are in the game. TCU's Froghorn, the Horned Frogs celebrate touchdowns with the Froghorn. That's going to be in the game. Oklahoma State's paddles, they're going to celebrate with symbolic paddles showing their passion in Stillwater. Liberty's going to have their player hand signs, unique hand signals in the game. Nebraska's balloons, after Nebraska scores a touchdown, they're going to release balloons into the sky, which is, I think, is a massive one, and they have so many more, which I'm excited about. They do also mention that they concentrated on adding a lot more of the rivalry game trophies. They don't specifically call out which ones that are there, but I think if you look at the screenshot from the trophy room, you're going to obviously see that there are a lot more added to the game this year. We'll hopefully see more of that talked about in the deep dive for the Dynasty, which I'm going to have for you guys tomorrow. They touched a lot on player authenticity this year, which makes me happy. I feel like for the most part, they had a good entry for player authenticity last year, but I think we could all agree they needed to up it up quite a bit. There were a lot of different issues with sort of skin tones or players' hair or just names not really matching a lot of things, and I'm glad to see that they're taking a good step here. They're working a lot on getting the player likenesses to be upgraded and much better using obviously machine learning like they talked about last year, but there's also sort of player body types they want to make sure they work on, and they're introducing a new one called the lean body type. They mentioned specifically Aiden Childs, the QB from Michigan State. He's 6'3", 217, and the lean body type kind of captures his athleticism a little bit more, and his body type looks a lot more accurate. The lean body type is also going to help, I think, not just QBs that are skinny like, you know, Aiden Childs, but it's also going to help defensive backs and wide receivers because a lot of those dudes just looked way too muscular for what they obviously should have been at their position. They have jersey deformation and wrinkle simulation, which again sounds like a crazy buzzword, but I think it looks really cool. As the players sort of move around, twist and turn, they use machine learning to kind of train thousands of player animations for realistic jersey deformation, which is just, it looks cool. It looks cool. You're going to see the jersey twist and move and feel like it's pulling a little bit as they sort of move around the field, and it just, when you go into the replay, it looks fantastic. And speaking of uniforms, they did a lot to make sure that every team kind of looked much better. They've made significant progress in expanding and updating uniform options, ensuring that every team from the high schools to the FCS programs kind of look their best on the field. And speaking of high school team uniforms, they have a mix of classic and kind of modern styles for high school teams when you're going into Road to Glory. These are going to be unique to each high school, so whether you prefer traditional designs or modern looks, the uniforms kind of capture the essence of high school football is probably the best way to put it. What's really interesting and a great note here is that players can actually import custom teams from Team Builder for even more personalization. So if you want to go create your high school or your dream high school in Team Builder, you can import that in a Road to Glory to have for your experience, which I think is a great move. Just like last year though, they're going to be adding a lot more uniforms throughout the year. So Delaware and Missouri State's assets are obviously brand new to the game this year, but they have updates to a whole lot of teams, including helmets and jersey options as well. And they also went ahead and fixed a lot of different things that we, saw pointed out last year. So for example, fixing the color shift on Arizona's maroon helmet and then the nameplate clipping into the stripes on LSU's, which I feel like was complained about a ton. Things like that are going to be fixed and updated a lot this year. We talked about head coaches before, but there are over 300 head coaches and their likeness actually included into the game, which again is a massive win, I think, for gamers. And this includes obviously both head coaches, but also a large amount of the real offensive and defensive coordinators across the team. So they don't call out specifically which coaches aren't in the game, but I feel like we haven't really seen anything from Bill Belichick. We haven't seen anything from Deion Sanders. My guess is they're not in the game, but we'll find out closer to launch. But they also did a lot for the student crowd and kind of secondary characters. So think your cheerleaders or other players or other characters that are kind of in the game. They have over 17 new heads for these secondary characters, which I think is going to help out with the crowd. They have strand hair simulations. So basically the easiest way to put this is that the secondary characters you're going to see in the crowd look very similar from a fidelity standpoint to the players on the field. And then you have student hero crowds and cheerleaders. So these characters have been upgraded to match the detail of their players, which we just sort of referenced. And that one super fan that everybody saw at every single game last year, well, they have so much more variance in terms of the secondary hero student crowds that are going to be there that you shouldn't just see the same person every single game. You should have a lot more variety. Commentary was a really big discussion point, I think, last year. There were moments where commentary felt good. There were moments where I think a lot of people felt like there wasn't enough just enthusiasm behind a lot of the calls, and the dev team has heard that. So for College Football 26, they're bringing about 200 additional hours from the booth commentary, and they've recorded about 15,000 new lines to build on their initial College Football 25 content. There's going to be a lot more content around rivalry games, so think Battle of the Bones, Wagon Wheel, Battle for I-10, the college football playoff and callouts, recaps on significant results that happened in the actual 2024 college football season. So things like Texas having that early visit to Michigan last year, the 8 overtime classic we saw between Georgia and Georgia Tech, which I still can't believe went 8 overtimes. And then you're going to cap it off with sort of some 2024 college football playoff games, in case you're looking for a little payback out there. There's also going to be more banter that's focused around coaches and players from last year. So real coaches being a part of the game, they should obviously be talking about the real coaches, and the commentary teams are going to be exploring that for the first time this year. And then for the players, some of these players are going to be mentioned because they've returned for this upcoming season. That's going to help really just push as they sort of talk about, pushing towards the playoffs and discussing, some of the answers around the production these players might have. But a really cool piece of information that I read out of this blog, which I think is important here, is that they want to add to your story throughout your season, whether you're in Dynasty or Road to Glory. And kind of hearing how your season is progressing through the commentary is a really important part of that. There's going to be a focus on creating talking points about the postseason results from the previous year, national ranking check-ins, reliance on the transfer portal, your recruiting results, and how you as a player are progressing through an individual game, which I think that's going to help make this feel a lot more alive. Now, music is obviously a big part of the game, and let's start off with the PA music side of things. So fan favorites from last year like Sandstorm, Zombie Nation, Tsunami, and of course Mo Bamba, which I feel like played every couple of plays last year. Those are all coming back. But they're also going to be adding to that with Shipping Up to Boston, Mr. Brightside, Seven Nation Army, and Enter Sandman, along with a whole lot more. And if you're a school like Virginia Tech or Michigan where you use, these songs in a specific way, that will obviously be captured into the game. From a marching band standpoint, they actually changed up the marching band that they're going to be using in the game. So the Metallica contest that they had, the winner of that was Auburn University, so they'll be the one that's actually recording a lot of this. And they're going to be launching with 88 new pieces of marching band music to kind of, help your stadium experience for the players. They specifically mentioned taking a lot of time to scour message boards, Reddit, and social media, or even some of the content creators out there to really find the ones that people were caring about the most. So if you're an Arizona, Kansas, Clemson fan, they got you. SMU, they've got you. Houston, they've definitely got you as well. And they also talk about the menu music, which I think a lot of people talked about. The drum lines were, cool at first, but then I think they killed a lot of us out there. So they have 20 new drumline tracks to feature in the game as well. And there's also going to be adding 16 different pop song covers by their marching band too. And the last little piece I forgot to mention here is that we have 51 new fight songs coming in from around the country, and they have 16 stadium rattling interpretations of songs from pop and rock. So you're going to hear interpretations of Blinding Lights, I Had Some Help, Bombs Over Baghdad, Swag Surfing, Get By, Focus, DNA, Vegas, and more to kind of just give you some variety in the game. And then from a chants crowd perspective, they added about 160 different chants to the game across all the different modes. So this actually is going to factor in for both high school for Road to Glory and then obviously the regular base game when you're in college. They focus a lot on amplifying kind of fight songs and the different rousers out there. So they added, Maryland's chant for the victory song to Bowling Greens, different chants they have, the A Ziggy. Those are all going to be in the game. I think what's really cool though, when I actually heard this when I was playing the game down in Orlando, is that for Mr. Brightside and Enter Sandman, they actually have the chants kind of singing along to go with those songs too. And I think once you actually hear that in the game, it just gives you a different feeling. And Christian Brandt from the dev team, who works heavily on the presentation, said, if you think Mo Bamba at Penn State was loud last year, wait until you drop into the whiteout this year and the whole stadium is singing along to get on those iconic first plays for delay of game penalties. It's kind of insane. And then for crowd noise, they actually wanted to make sure they talked about that too. And over the past year, they've been looking at ways to sort of amplify and build out that crowd experience to make places like Tiger Stadium at LSU or Austin Stadium at Oregon just stand out a little bit more. They actually mentioned about their partnership with ESPN, and I'm going to be honest, I completely forgot that EA Sports even had a partnership with ESPN at this point, but they mentioned that they have a partnership that's continued with ESPN in this area, and they've been fantastic about helping build these environments out. And they're going to have recordings from over 40 different games from the 2024 season as part of their crowd bank to further rattle the girders as you play around the country. I know we've talked a ton about audio and different features, but it's also just not about audio when you talk about presentation. It's about the visuals you're going to see in the game as well. They've talked about refreshing the game with a new style and other broadcast banners throughout the game. From the first time you enter the field to in between quarters and halftime stat updates, they've sort of done a refresh of all of that. One thing that I noticed is that when you're sort of entering the field, you get a different variety of information that can kind of come up to you to talk about comparing top players between the game, lineup of the defensive lineup, or maybe a certain section of players within that. There's a crew of top talented running backs in the game. They might highlight those or outline those, comparing QBs against each other, featuring teams that have top impact players and how they look out throughout the game. There's a lot more nuance that kind of gives it that real broadcast that you kind of see on a Saturday. The presentation deep dive was really cool. I think the big thing for a lot of us though that we just want to see is more energy and enthusiasm from Chris Fowler and company as they're sort of talking about these games and broadcasting those. And I think from the snippets that Chris Fowler has posted on social media, he's addressed that, he's talked about that, he says that he's trying to amp it up as well. But proof is in the pudding. When the game drops here shortly, we'll be able to see all that and more. What is your favorite thing from the presentation blog? Let me know down in the comments down below. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe because we're getting closer to 300,000 subs. Be safe, be smart, tell somebody you love them. Catch you guys on the next one.